Okay, so here we are in lesson 2, the negative space painting. So I have a little thumbnail sketch. I have my inexpensive watercolor palette on the left and some Caran d'Ache on the right. I'm starting with a big soft brush and some watercolor paper. And I've put just the water down first, and now I'm adding some color. So having a sketch handy while painting the background is nice because you know the colors you'd like for your piece, and you can decide what sort of colors you'd like to focus on with your palette, and then just allow yourself to fully play and allow the colors to merge and flow. I'm adding a little bit of a grayish blue to tone down the bright saturated pinks. So using a variety of colors and playing around, you could always do 2 to 3 backgrounds at a time and choose your favorite once they're all dry. If you're in a flow and you want to continue, I highly recommend playing with backgrounds. So while my background is still wet, I'm using these Caran d'Ache crayons that are water soluble and just finding some really expressive mark making with a variety of colors. So for this project, the background is mostly going to be covered up, so you can really just play. And I'm adding a little bit of water to the Caran d'Ache, and it blends out the water-soluble crayon. And then some areas I just leave drawn. So now my background is dry, and now I'm taking a look at my thumbnail, and I am seeing the proportion of my pomegranate and sketching everything that I would like to have as structural lines on the dry background with a light pencil. If you know you're going to use a dark background color, you can use a darker pencil so you can see a little clearer, because a light pencil is hard to see. So from that first exercise where we were exploring the symbol, I referenced those sketches to come to a decision about what kind of imagery I was going to have for this particular piece. So still just working with one symbol at a time and not really combining too many things yet. So I've got everything sketched, and now I'm bringing out the craft paint. I've got some turquoise, some white. I have a paper palette here, and I'm mixing everything together. I'm creating a tone, so that's actually black. And I am mixing white and black with this turquoise color to create a tone, which darkens and softens the intensity of the color. So I did a little test, and I've decided that I want it to be a little lighter and a little bit more gray. Combining, I'm using a round brush, and now I'm using a thinner brush to get into some of these details. I found that color is working well, and I'm going to go around the edges of my subject matter. So instead of filling in the positive shapes, the actual pomegranate and the actual leaves, I'm going around those shapes so that what's left when the background is filled in is the subject. And so the subject takes on the color of the original background that is expressive and watery. And then I'm using these acrylic paints to create opacity and a nice contrast to find a really nice difference between positive shape and negative shape. So I'm filling in the negative shapes with the color, and I'm leaving the positive shapes as the background. So it takes a little bit of adjustment because we're used to focusing on rendering an image and leaving the background. But in this case, we're reversing it. We're detailing the space around the subject. And this takes some time. And I'm starting out with just this one color. You can add a lot of blending and blend some different colors. You can have the background just be a really solid, uniform color. Your background might be really light. You might choose white or a cream or a tint of a color. You might choose just gray. And depending on what color palette you choose is going to determine how the piece feels. And so deciding what you want your symbol to evoke and coming up with a color palette that supports that emotion, that feeling, is really good to consider before starting. At the same time, you can be really intuitive and fly by the seat of your pants and just see what happens. All of those are great ways to learn and explore with creativity. So now I've decided that I want to have a little bit of blended color in my background. I don't really want to stick with a uniform color. So I have a couple of different greens from my craft paint that I am going to mix with the existing background color. And what this is going to do is just add a little bit more interest and variation in the background. And we can practice blending paint and mixing color. And I'm working on a really thick watercolor paper. And so I'm adding water to the acrylic paint to thin it up. I'm going to add a circle in this space here. So sometimes when you start making the work, the piece will begin to speak to you and give you ideas as you go along. And that's the beauty of the creative flow. When the marks that you're making and the colors that you're choosing start having a conversation with you and you say, oh, this would be neat to add this here. And oh, let's try this color. And so it just really depends on you. But I encourage you to allow for an element of surprise in your practice. So I've decided I don't really want to have that background that I'm painting in be all the way to the edges. And so I am lightening up the edges of the shape that I've painted so that it can begin to blend in with the existing background, the more flowy watercolor background. And I also have decided to just outline the bottom of this vine shape with a lighter tint of the color I had already created. And this adds a nice element of line and allows for the background to shine through to give that pop of red and pink and golden that speaks to the rest of the composition. And then I begin to blend it and work with it into this darker area. So you can play with paint, your thickness of paint, how much water you want to add to your paint. You can work on a canvas or whatever you like. And of course, if you're not into painting at all, you can use marker, colored pencil, ink, squash, just really anything that feels good for you. And in that last lesson, I encouraged you to explore a lot of materials to see what felt good for you. And then this lesson, you can expand your exploration of those types of mediums. And so I also encourage you to move your paper around or your canvas around to make it easily accessible for you to make your piece in comfort, because sort of craning your wrist around is not really necessary. So just make yourself comfortable. And once again, I'm just outlining the top of this vine that is cradling the top of the pomegranate. And then once again, I'm adding just water on this larger brush, and I'm letting it become a wash and merge into the background around the edges here. And then lots and lots of water here. And I decided to fill in that whole top corner and then lighten it up, blend some different values together, adding some painterly strokes, and just playing with the value overall, deciding to lighten it up in a lot of the areas with some of that white mixed with the turquoise and black. So just moving around the piece. Now I'm mixing a new color, a really light green, and adding a little bit of detail into the background here. And just playing, being bold and expressive with the mark making and finding some solutions for the merging of the solid background into this linear area. And remember, nobody ever has to see this. If you're a beginner and you're not versed in the material you're using, you don't feel really comfortable with that material yet, just continue to show up with that material and practice and refine and play and allow yourself to just explore. And then over time, you'll become more confident with the use of materials and the colors you're using. And then that really helps come into a deeper flow with your creativity as well. So now I'm taking that really light green and I'm creating outlines around the flowy leaves. And this is going to create a clearer view of my subject, which is this pomegranate on her vine. And also adding more of an element of line is going to bring more detail and interest to the piece. And of course, painting lines can be difficult. You can always use a paint pen or a crayon or a pastel. You can use colored pencils or graphite, charcoal, oil pastels, whatever you think is going to be suitable for you and make you feel like you can move into a flow and enjoy yourself. I recommend finding those materials. And I also recommend doing this exercise a number of times, using a different symbol for each time. So the first lesson, you can redo that with several different symbols. And then this lesson, you can redo it with different symbols as your guide. Over the duration of the course, you will be able to explore several symbols and then begin combining them to have conversations and create narratives and give more power to the images that you are attracted to. So now I'm adding some yellow acrylic to the mix. It's a golden yellow. And I'm adding some of that yellow to the existing light green and adding more white as well. So I really love using the same color throughout a piece because that helps unify the piece. So if I just had red in only one area and then all of the other areas had different colors, then that red would stand out and maybe feel like, an oddball in the composition, which there's definitely times when that is a relevant choice. But overall, I really recommend using similar colors throughout the piece. So when I have a color mixed, I like to kind of pop around to all the different areas of the piece and add that color to anywhere that I feel it's going to benefit. Once again, just blending out some colors. And you can always pat it down with a paper towel if you feel like it's on too thick or you added too much water. And then if you'd like to add a textural element or a repeating shape, just something to break up the background, you can do that. I really like this arched, repetitive textural element, and I've got the darker green, and then I come in with a lighter green. So it creates a little bit of dimension and interest. And now I'm adding a symbol that I call the root, and I am introducing the Posca paint pen in a pink color. And sometimes you have to go over it a couple of times to get some nice dark opacity, or if you'd like to keep it subtle. So just going through with the paint pen and seeing where I can add a few little details, finishing up, just allowing the piece to speak to me as I bring some more details in. So this is a gold gel pen by Uniball. And you can also use a gold Posca paint pen. This is just really the icing on top, right? So the painting is done and I am going through and just adding little details here and there. And metallics are really fun because they actually move with the light when you're physically with the piece. So final details, and then I am finished exploring negative space. Enjoy this lesson.